Hi everyone, this is John Gerardi with Right to Life of Central California, bringing you another in our 40 videos for 40 days series. 40 Days for Life is the international campaign of prayer and presence outside abortion clinics throughout the country and throughout the world. If you want to learn more about our 40 Days for Life campaign in this last week, get in touch with us at 559-229-2229. Today on the program, I want to talk a little bit about physician-assisted suicide. Physician-assisted suicide has become a major issue in the state of California, where after several decades of trying to legalize the practice, the proponents of physician-assisted suicide finally succeeded in a special session of the California State Legislature in 2015, a special session of the legislature that was supposed to be focused on healthcare funding, in which they instead used to ram through physician-assisted suicide. We oppose this practice for a number of reasons, but the argument against physician-assisted suicide is a little bit more difficult to make to a lot of people than the arguments against abortion. With abortion, you have someone being killed. With physician-assisted suicide, someone is killing themselves and just getting assistance from somebody else to do it in the form of a prescription from a doctor. And people have a more difficult time sort of understanding what the ethical problem is with physician-assisted suicide. Well, look, this is an individual's own choice for their own body. It's not like abortion where you're making a choice for some other human being. Someone's just taking their own life into their own hands. Well, the difficulty, the problem, the ethical problem lies in the dignity of the human person. That if there is any purpose to the existence of government, it is to protect individuals from acts of private violence, including acts of homicide. The state functions not just to protect us from acts of violence from others. The state also functions to protect me from acts of violence against myself. If I were to come on, my radio broadcast or something and to make credible threats of harm to myself, someone could get in touch with the police. Someone could get in touch with various government agencies. Someone who sees me about to, jump from the Golden Gate Bridge or something would be legally authorized to tackle me to the ground and coerce me not to do it. Our state takes this position that all human life is precious, including from attacks from ourselves, because the taking of any life is something egregiously wrong. No person is genuinely an island, and the killing of any individual person, even that person killing themselves, has horrific effects on the social ties that connect all of us to each other. The dignity of the human person is such that the state has an obligation not just to protect against acts of private violence from one individual to another, but to protect individuals from themselves. Through physician-assisted suicide, what we are basically saying is that if you have a terminal diagnosis, if you have a 6-month terminal diagnosis, if you're at the end of your life, if your health care is something that is onerous and difficult, the state of California no longer values your life in the same way. And that's one of the great tragedies of physician-assisted suicide. Every state that has legalized physician-assisted suicide has coincidentally, or maybe not so coincidentally, seen its systems of palliative care suffer as a result. Insurance companies are already starting to jump on and take advantage of the possible benefits, using scare quotes there, benefits of assisted suicide, because let's face it, it's a lot cheaper to kill yourself through physician-assisted suicide than it is to get extensive experimental chemo or a dialysis machine or et cetera, the various kinds of drastic healthcare interventions at the end of life. Those are usually very expensive. Physician-assisted suicide is very cheap. So what we see with physician-assisted suicide is a devaluing of the human person, a civilization that is choosing, in the name of compassion, actually taking the least compassionate way out, failing to recognize that if there are persons who are facing difficult and excruciating suffering at the end of their life, our role as a society is to help them, to aid them, to build up a civilization of love that can help tend and care for such persons rather than casting them aside. This also relates to why disability advocacy groups have always opposed physician-assisted suicide. It is their healthcare that is often the most difficult, the most burdensome, and the most expensive. And so the incentives for those with disabilities to cheaply kill themselves rather than to, perhaps in a way that expends more resources, seek palliative care, seek enduring medical care, those incentives are very perverse and often work against the interests of those with disabilities. Tomorrow on the show, I want to talk about some of the problems with the physician-assisted suicide programs in a lot of different states and the ways in which their protections against abuse in the system are really very lacking. For Right to Life of Central California, I'm John Gerardi.